Humanity matters.
This is Alan Mindel with HMTV here at HMTC. And today for our show Influential Origins, I have a phenomenal guest, Esther Finder, who is from Generations of the Shoah International. Esther, thank you so much for being available for the program. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
So Esther, tell me what Generations of the Shoah International is. Tell me about the organization.
GSI we're right now celebrating our 23rd anniversary. We are an organization that is dedicated to freely sharing information and resources with our brothers and sisters all around the world in the Holocaust survivor community. We are intergenerational, we are international, and we serve as a bridge between all the major Holocaust organizations like the U.S. Holocaust Museum, Yad Vashem, etc., and the survivor community around the world.
So I am a 2G. I've had both of my parents were survivors. Were your parents survivors?
Both of them.
Both of them. So tell me about them and where they were from.
Both of my parents were born in a little town in Poland called Lask, L-A-S-K, outside of Łódź. And my father was taken for slave labor fairly early. Both of them were 16 when the war started. So my dad was in a total of 12 camps, but I only have the names of 11. One of the camps he was in and out of during the death march. And he's got an incredible story, which has been documented by the Shoah Foundation and is available online on Eyewitness. My father's name was Harry Toporek, and my name shows up, I think, on your screen so people can get the spelling. My mother was in the Łódź ghetto for about 2 years before she was sent to Birkenau. Both of my parents were Auschwitz survivors. And then her story is not documented. She died when I was in high school before we had the technology to record all these things. So
did she tell you the story?
She told me part of her story. My mother had a physical wound. Part of her left shoulder had a dent in it because she was in a cattle car that was bombed by the Allies, and one wall of the car fell on her shoulder. And for the rest of her life, she had a dent in her arm. So I could see something was going on there. So I asked what it was and what happened and how did she get that. And so that story came out. But for the most part, she talked about pre-war, her childhood. But then again, she died when I was a teenager. I guess she didn't want to tell me too much when I was so young. So I have just anecdotal pieces of her story. My aunt, who was with her, recorded testimony. So I have at least a chronology where she was and when.
And, I think for a lot of the first generation, now that we've successfully been able, and really so much of it due to the Shoah Foundation, they recorded so many survivors, and really probably, I would say, at the perfect time.
Well, we're still doing interviews. I'm still volunteering with the Shoah Foundation, collecting Holocaust survivor testimonies. Not as many as we did in the 1990s, but we're still doing them.
I just think that for many survivors, and I put my parents in this category, the things that I learned about them, I didn't learn it in one shot. It was kind of over time.
Right.
Under a stressful situation or at a particular moment that just seemed to click right, they were in the mood to tell me. Did you learn that from your parents? Were there just simply times when their experiences just sort of came out?
I used to sit and listen when my parents would sit with other survivors and talk, usually in Yiddish, and I would often be in the next room eavesdropping. Now, I don't speak Yiddish fluently. If anything, I speak a zerbrochene Yiddish. And I'm not even that accomplished anymore because I have no one to speak to in Yiddish anymore. But I
Right.
would sit and listen to them talking. Now, I was very lucky. My family is very lucky because both of my parents survived with siblings. So they would talk about their early years and they would talk about the people that they knew in common. And then they would also talk about the war. So I heard a lot of stuff, wasn't directly presented to me until later. After my mom died, my dad started talking and he told me stories. My mother just told me pre-war stuff, except for the shoulder. And there was no way she was going to hide that.
Because she couldn't. She
Well,
grew up.
she could hide it when she went out on the street. She never wore anything sleeveless. She always had a sleeve, but you couldn't hide it from us at home.
Right. So I'm sure that experience is part of what motivated you
Oh, sure.
on your journey. But I mean, you are a pretty advanced Holocaust educator. And so what made you want to do that? What made that your choice in life is what you were going to dedicate yourself to?
Well, actually, I went into the study of psychology in large part because I wanted to understand how people could do these things to other people. Could not fathom what would possess someone to do the kinds of horrible things that the Nazis did. And then I went from that interest to learning the history. But professionally, I was a professor of psychology. And then while I was teaching, I was also doing interviews for both the U.S. Holocaust Museum, because I used to live in Washington, and the Shoah Foundation. And then now that I'm retired from teaching, I work with the survivor community doing interviews and sorted other things with it. Whatever the survivors need that I can help with, I'm happy to help.
And at one point, you realized that as important it was to talk to the first generation survivors, I guess maybe some of that psychology education came to understand that there was a story to tell for the second generation and third as well. And you believe that it was important to interview them also, correct?
I don't interview second generation as much as I interview survivors. I think for the most part, we have a larger window of opportunity to get the second generation. Some of the survivors I'm interviewing now are in their hundreds. So
Wow.
they have pride of place. There's no question about it. The clock is ticking a lot louder there.
Yeah.
So I'm always happy to interview the survivors. I have tried to help some second generation interview other second generation because my attention now is focused on the survivors, but I think it's important to get the second generation's stories too. More importantly, perhaps, than just documenting our experiences, I try a lot to help descendants, the second and the third generation. I try to help them prepare for when they can go to schools and speak publicly, because it's so important when anybody goes out to speak about the Holocaust that they do it well. So I've had several teacher training workshops to help the second generation prepare and present well. They have to research their own story, but I can give them some general guidelines.
Well, we have here at the Holocaust Center, we still have some first generation survivors, but the numbers are dwindling. The travel between schools has become more difficult. We arrange full transportation now, and we're starting to have to rely on the 2Gs and the 3Gs to tell that story. It's just the numbers between how many schools you have and how many survivors you have available. It's incumbent upon that second generation to pick up the torch and take on some of that responsibility. How do you see this progressing now as we really are at the tail end of the lifespan of the first generation? How do you see Holocaust education going forward in that post-survivor world?
I think one of the first things we need to do is to enlighten educators that there are members of the survivor community that can carry the legacy, children and grandchildren of survivors specifically. I am the president of the Holocaust Survivors Group of Southern Nevada here in the Las Vegas area, and we periodically get requests for speakers. And people don't have a clue. They'll call up and they'll say, well, I'd like a couple of camp survivors and maybe a hidden child. And, and what is this, the deli counter? You're putting in
right, like they're picking out of the groceries.
Yeah, what? And they're lucky if we have, some child survivors who are still speaking. Our camp survivors are, some of them, we have one gentleman who's 101 plus. I can't send him to all these schools. This is a lot to ask for somebody that age.
Right.
So we send out child survivors, hidden children, refugees. And what I'll do is I'll send a second generation with them who is the child of a camp survivor. So at least the camp survivor story can get out there. Over the last few years, we've had to do some creative programming because what we could do 10 and 15 years ago, we can't do now. I cannot send one survivor to necessarily carry a whole program for an hour with this group of students. It's a lot for some of them. Right. So we'll put together a panel with different survivor experiences. And I always have a second generation with them or a third generation with them to help field questions, because sometimes the survivors can't hear the questions from the students, and to bring a different story to the table. And one of the things that I personally have been doing is when I go out and speak, I'll bring clips from my dad's Shoah Foundation testimony, and I will show that. I will set the stage and explain where my dad is in the story, in the chronology, and what the setting is. He's in this camp, or he's on the death march, or wherever he may be. And then I let him tell his own story. So this is something that I've only started doing. People have been doing it for years, but I only started doing it after my dad passed away. I couldn't bring myself to do it while he was still alive. But I do now.
I know here, we always think in terms of when we're trying to boil down what we want our kids to take away from it. For us, it's a lot about upstander education, teaching people to be the people that stand up against evil. But what is the message you're working on when you talk to students today? What are you trying to accomplish?
That's just one of the messages that I try to focus on. Another one that I'm trying to get through to people is our common humanity. When people look at the Holocaust only in terms of Jewish victims, they compartmentalize it and they separate themselves from it. And I think it's important that people realize that we're all human beings. And the Jews were the victim this time, or among other victims, but the primary victim this time. But next time, who's it going to be? And if we don't stop this and appreciate the fact that we have much more in common than we have that separates us, that's another thing that I'm trying to get at. I will sometimes also go into a more political science perspective to try to help people appreciate the rights and the responsibilities we have as American citizens, and how we shouldn't take things for granted. Freedom is not free.
No.
We should respect what we have here and protect it. So there are several different messages. A lot of it depends on my audience and what I was requested to talk about.
The thing, there are definitely been genocides that have occurred since the Holocaust. But on the other hand, there is a unique Jewish experience too. Do you see that through history?
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Definitely.
I once had an opportunity to speak in a private school. This was years ago when I lived in Maryland. And I think there was perhaps one Jewish teacher in the school. And after I did my presentation, he's very casually says, well, how is the Holocaust different from other genocides? And he was very arrogant and very condescending. And I did something that I had never done before and I have never done since. But I went through the financials and I went through the line items in a genocide financial layout, and he was floored. I talked about things like how the properties and the assets of the Jews were used to pay for the trains and took them to the camps, and I went through all of that much better than I just did now. But he was floored, and he had no answer for me. So yeah, look, pain is pain, and I don't like to get into competitive suffering, and I certainly don't do that within the survivor community. People got killed just as dead in Bergen-Belsen as they did in Birkenau. I mean, yeah. Dead is dead, and tortured and horrific experiences. I don't get into any of that competitive suffering stuff. Same thing with genocides. It's horrible.
Yeah. Suffering is suffering for sure. The thing that we are watching here in New York, we have a gentleman that's running for mayor in this town.
Yes, you do.
And war is a horrible thing, and death in war is a horrible thing. Whether it's a soldier that died, and even worse so if it's a civilian. But there is a difference between prosecuting a war, which unfortunately is a never-ending event on the world stage, and what a genocide is. When a group has decided they're going to wipe another group off the face of the earth. I mean, the percentages of Jews killed in Poland, it's an unprecedented number that were killed between 1939 and 1945. Is it the number of Jews that existed in the world pre-1939? We still haven't hit that number, right. And it's 2025, right?
Right.
And that is what it means for someone to commit genocide against you, right? When their stated purpose, when they were going to come up with the final solution, it was a solution to the existence of Jews, amongst others, but we were the primary target.
Right.
When we look and you put on the news and someone comes and he specifically looks at the Jewish state and Jews and he says, yeah, you guys are the new Nazis. What do you say to that?
Fortunately, I'm not in New York, but I am watching what's going on there with horror. And if Israel wanted to commit genocide, there would be no Gaza October 8th.
Right.
It would be gone.
It'd be gone.
It'd be gone. And people throw around the word genocide without knowing what it means. One of the key features of genocide is the intention to kill a people. And this doesn't apply to what's going on with Gaza. Come on.
It's an amazing thing because there's more than just that one fact. The percentages, not that we want people to die, the number that were combatants versus non-combatants.
Right.
Does that mean that America committed genocide in Iraq? Does that mean America committed genocide in Afghanistan? We were dealing with a situation where innocent Americans in a couple of towers, only a few miles from where I'm sitting right now, right? And people in the Pentagon, they were jumping out of windows. They were so far down that they weren't found for months.
Yeah.
I personally had a friend who was there, and he did not come out. He was a firefighter. Never made it out. His name was Christopher Pickford. You can look him up. You know, the world was not going to let that happen again. And yet, to prevent that from happening, it wasn't a genocide, it was a war. We now are throwing terms around so easily.
Right. They've lost their meaning.
That they've lost their meaning, and that we don't respect it. You know, that there used to be a certain level of understanding the news, you know, that doesn't occur today. And I wonder if you have any thoughts. You know, the quote from Goebbels, which he never even said, but if you tell a lie often enough to enough,
the big lie theory, yeah,
a big enough lie, they'll believe it.
Yeah, repeated.
When you look at what's on the news today, and when you look at the propaganda that's around today, you know, how do we use the Holocaust to teach the lesson today as the cautionary tale for what it really is?
We use the Holocaust the way we've always used the Holocaust, as an educational tool, as you say, as a cautionary tale, and as to show us what human beings are capable of. And I think we need to expand our perspective and not just look at the Jewish victims, but look at what Nazism did to the German people, turn them into perpetrators. And that's one thing that, you know, as a descendant of Holocaust survivors, I am incredibly proud that I am not a descendant of perpetrators, that my parents were decent human beings and not monsters. So, you know, we can use the lessons from the Holocaust for all kinds of things. I used to teach psychology. I used the Holocaust often when I talked about social psychology and the power of the situation. And, you know, some of the famous experiments that were done by Solomon Asch and Stanley Milgram and even Philip Zimbardo, just to demonstrate we are all human and we are all susceptible to being seduced by lies and propaganda. So, you know, the Holocaust stands as a cautionary tale, but so many people are trying to hijack it, revise it, deny it.
Right. Or accuse us of being the same people that we were subjected to.
Right. Well, they look for the most horrific thing they could throw at us, and then they keep throwing it at us. It doesn't mean it's true. But there are people who want to believe bad things about Jews. And they looked for validation for these beliefs. They're anti-Semitic at their core somewhere. They're anti-Semitic at some level. And then they look for validation by, you know, seeking sources of information that will confirm what they already believe.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about the organization? Maybe you can give some information out for some of our listeners today about it, and just talk about what you guys are trying to do going forward.
GSI has always been freely dedicated to sharing information and resources. We have no president. We have no spokesperson. We collect no money. And we have the chutzpah to call ourselves a Jewish organization. But we will try to help educators, students, survivor groups, descendant groups, whoever needs help. Obviously, we can't help them financially because we have no money, but we can help connect people. We can help new groups form. We've done that quite often. If there's no second or third generation group in a community, they can reach out to us and we will help them get started. And then we just launch them and they're on their own. We don't interfere with anybody's internal group dynamics. It's not our thing.
Right.
And we try to make sure that the educators at the universities and the people who work at the Holocaust memorials and museums are aware of, you know, things going on in the survivor community and vice versa. So we're natural allies. The groups like the Association of Holocaust Organizations, for example, will carry our monthly newsletter. And we have a presence on Facebook. We don't charge anything. Anybody can get the newsletter, and everybody's welcome.
Well, Esther, it's been a real pleasure having you today. I hope people take your experiences and try to understand a little bit about what this educational programs are about, what we're still trying to accomplish, and that, these are lessons that will probably, unfortunately, always just be so incredibly relevant. Did that psychology education ever help answer why the Nazis were who they were?
Not so much. Although
not
some of the social psychology gave me some insights into how easily duped we can be. But the psychology helped me a lot with the interviews that I did. So, I got some value from my education.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Esther. And it's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.